The detention of Mahmoud Khalil, a permanent U.S. resident and recent graduate of Columbia University, has sparked countrywide concerns over the erosion of constitutional rights under President Donald Trump. Immigration enforcement agents entered university housing and arrested Khalil in front of his pregnant wife, saying they revoked his green card. Khalil played a prominent role in campus protests against Israel's genocide in Gaza before he graduated last December. And the Trump administration is now using his advocacy to justify deportation. Is this just the beginning of Trump's escalating crackdown on free speech? And what impact will Khalil's case have on pro-Palestinian student activism? Joining me to discuss this is Ramzi Kassem, professor of law at the City University of New York and co-director of CLEAR, a legal non-profit that represents Mr. Khalil, and Tamara Turki, a Palestinian-Austrian student at Columbia University School of Journalism. Ramzi, let's start with you. You are challenging Khalil's detention in court, and he's being held at a detention center in Louisiana. Have you been able to speak to him? How's he doing?
Yes, thank you for having me. We were in court on Wednesday on Khalil's case. This was the first hearing, and I appeared on his behalf before a federal judge here in New York City. One of the things we asked for was for the judge to order the government to allow us to have an attorney-client privileged conversation with Mr. Khalil in Louisiana. So the judge ordered that. We were able to have the first call last night. Of course, I'm limited in what I can say about that, but what I can tell you is that he's in good spirits, he's in fighting spirits, and he's very supportive of the literally thousands of people who have taken to the streets to protest what has happened to him, to show solidarity with him and his family, and to continue to express solidarity with the plight of the Palestinian people in Gaza and beyond.
All right. So, Tamara, let me bring you in here. You are on campus. You are friends with Khalil. Tell us what's happening on campus right now, and how have pro-Palestinian students been affected by these latest developments?
I mean, I think I would describe the energy and atmosphere on campus to be very dystopian, because on one hand, you have students who are completely shattered by what's happened to Mahmoud. But, I would be lying to say if that was a, complete representation of what's happening on campus. Now that the weather is nicer, you have students who are sunbathing on our lawns, blasting music. And I think it's been really hard for us who are hurting to see these displays of apathy. What I will say is that what I've come to realize over the last few months that I've been at Columbia is that Mahmoud wasn't the lead negotiator of the encampment because he was the leader of the movement. He was the lead negotiator because he's an incredibly calm and collected and very patient person who was able to withstand and navigate very dehumanizing interactions with the press and with administration, and did so, protecting a lot of students who were unable to unmask. And so a lot of us did feel safer on campus because of Mahmoud. And so I'm not surprised to see the amount of mobilization for him on campus.
So are you saying that despite feeling vulnerable, students are emboldened and they are visible, they are out there still advocating for their message?
Oh, definitely. I think because, repression has been so horrible for so long that those people have been taking risks for quite some time. Although I was really initially shaken up the first, 2 days, as a Palestinian in the diaspora, I'm very much grounded in the fact that my people back home are remaining steadfast in the midst of a genocide. So how could I allow myself as a Palestinian who has the privilege of studying in the West to be silenced? Because essentially, if we allow ourselves for the intimidation to work, then what they tried to do and the example they tried to make out of Mahmoud would have worked. And I will not allow that to happen.
Ramzi, let's just revisit what happened here. Plainclothes immigration enforcement agents walked into university housing without showing a warrant. they detained and arrested a lawful permanent resident who has not been accused of any crime, has not committed any crime. And then they said that the State Department was revoking his green card. Now, can you put this into perspective? Is this a normal application of immigration law?
Absolutely not. Everything about what happened to Mahmoud and to his family has been extraordinary, shocking, outrageous. And as you mentioned correctly, he's never been charged, arrested, convicted of any crimes, right? So typically, if you're going to put a person like that in removal proceedings, that person would not be detained. And if they are detained, they would be detained in New York or New Jersey. What the government did was they rendered him 1,000 miles away to Louisiana. And, all of this, from the targeting to the arrest to the detention to the move to Louisiana, all of it is retaliatory. I do want to say that I think it's going to backfire. On Wednesday, outside the courthouse, there were thousands of people massed, again, to protest in solidarity with Mahmoud, to demand his return, and to continue to denounce the ongoing genocide in Gaza.
The arrest and detention of Mahmoud has even caught the attention of the Secretary of State. I mean, he signed off on this arrest and went further, saying that he's going to revoke the green cards and visas of, I quote, Hamas supporters. With what authority does the Secretary of State arrest a student, protester, revoke green cards, and seek deportation?
The government here is relying on an obscure and old and little used provision of the immigration law that has a remarkable origin story. It's understood today to have been enacted primarily to target Eastern European Jewish Holocaust survivors who had come to the United States and were suspected, often wrongly suspected, of being Soviet agents. And it's because of that origin story, frankly, that Congress went back to this law and changed it and said that the Secretary of State can't use it to punish people for their speech. And if he wants to use it, or to try to use it to take away someone's green card because of their speech, then he has to personally certify that they are a compelling, their activities poses a compelling risk to U.S. foreign policy interests. So, the long and short of it is, it's a little used provision of immigration law, and it certainly does not trump the Constitution.
Tamara, let's just talk about Columbia University. Khalil himself faced harassment and calls from pro-Israel activists to have him deported. We understand he had requested protection from the university as recently as the day before his arrest. Do you see this lack of intervention as a failure on the part of the university? Do you feel they should be held accountable in some way?
Definitely. I mean, the reason why Mahmoud was detained was because of Columbia's role in vilifying his activism for Palestinian liberation and a complete and utter disregard for the safety of Palestinians, Arab students, and those who are very visibly Muslim. And we've received numerous emails since his detainment, and not once have they even mentioned Mahmoud's name. And they haven't even mentioned the horrific incident of what happened to him. And I think definitely this is an attempt to deflect accountability. They've yet to address whether they were prior notified by ICE as to whether they would be detaining Mahmoud, as well as how were ICE agents allowed to come onto campus without a judicial warrant. This is incredibly concerning for vocal international students, for undocumented students, and I'm just extremely appalled by the response of the university and their refusal to, take accountability for their role that they played in this.
Ramzi, let's just go back to the legal elements here. The idea that there is a terrorism exception to basic freedoms is not new. It was the US government's justification for detaining over 1,000 Muslim, Arab, South Asian men in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. Do you see this as the continuation of that history, using counterterrorism as a legal loophole upheld by both Democrat and Republican administrations post 9/11?
Well, Redi, there's certainly continuity on the rhetorical front, right? What government officials have been saying publicly about Mahmoud they've been using that terminology. You know, they've been throwing around words like Hamas and terrorism. But what's really important to know is that in court, whether it's an immigration court or in federal court, they're not alleging any sort of terrorism link whatsoever. This is all about silencing speech that's critical of U.S. government and Israeli government policies and speech in solidarity with Palestinians. And it's designed and intended to silence student protests. It's designed to send a message that somehow the movement in support of Palestinian lives here in the United States is driven by foreign actors. And of course, there are non-citizens and green card holders like Khalil who have been involved in the movement. But they are foolishly mistaken if they think that it is not an American movement. And I think this is what the reaction to Mr. Khalil's arrest shows, that this is actually an American movement. It's what we've been seeing over the past year and change in campuses nationwide, that these are Americans as well as permanent residents, as well as non-citizens, but mainly Americans who are outraged by continuing U.S. support for what everyone, now almost everyone agrees, is a genocide in Gaza.
So, Tamara, what does the future of your resistance look like? I mean, not just resistance to universities, but to the government as well, in the light of this increased intimidation.
I mean, something that's important to remember is that the fight, for Palestinian liberation and the resistance is not on U.S. campuses. It is, in fact, happening on the ground in Palestine by Palestinians who have been fighting a horrific and atrocious occupation for 75 years. And so our only job is to make sure that our tuition fees are not being used to invest in weapons that are being dropped on our people. This is a moral duty that concerns everyone. I think what we've seen over the last 2 years with the genocide in Gaza is the ability for people to mobilize during really difficult and horrible periods in history. And so I think Mahmoud's detainment, if anything, is going to invigorate people rather than, suppress or stifle resistance or, activism on U.S. campuses.
Ramzi and Tamara, thank you very much for giving us your time here on UpFront. We appreciate it. Thank you. So that's our show, UpFront. We'll be back next week.